welcome to our town hall on wildfire insurance. I'm your fire chief, Nico King. If you don't know me, thank you. Joining us tonight and the majority of the presentation is Brenda Kaloka from the California State Insurance Commissioner's Office. So she'll be bringing some higher level legislative changes and what you can expect through your homeowner's insurance. But of course, joining me up on the panel tonight is, of course, our council members, Bob Whalen, Sue Kempf, who have been leading the charge in this community with support of other council members since the 2019 wildfire safety mitigation report that came out with a long list of things that we could do to make our community safer. And as most of you know, in just earlier this year, that subcommittee got back together and looked at what was accomplished, what wasn't accomplished, what still needs to be accomplished. And we brought that to council just a couple months ago. And if you're interested, this coming Tuesday is the financial piece to match the prioritized projects with funding. So that's going to occur on Tuesday night. Also joining me up here is our fire marshal, Robert Montagami, and our emergency services coordinator, Sarah Limonis. But we'll be able to take some questions of what's going on here locally, but really tonight's presentation is from the state level. So with that, do any of you have any comments before we get started, Bob or Sue? Oh. All right, we'll jump right into the presentation. Brenda, it's all yours. Thank you for being here.
Hi, good evening. How is everyone doing today? All right. Thank you again for having me here. Like you mentioned, my name is Brenda Kaloka. I am with the California Department of Insurance under the leadership of Commissioner Ricardo Lara. Now, if we can pull up the presentation, that would be great. Just so you guys know, we are here to protect you. Any questions, concerns, please don't hesitate to contact our department. Need assistance with reading and understanding your insurance policy? Make sure that you use us as a resource, okay? You don't have to do this alone. Our main focus is consumer protection. And we can go ahead and go to the next page. Essentially, I'm going to go ahead and cover and recap. How many of you were here for the last presentation? Okay, some of you. Okay, I'll try to cover it as much. Can you guys hear me okay? Better? Okay. So last time, our deputy commissioner presented about our sustainable insurance strategy. Essentially, the strategy is what the commissioner led along with others to really try to modernize our insurance market, make it accessible, and also creating a resilient insurance market while maintaining our focus of protecting our communities from climate change. We can go to the next page. Now, what has happened? Essentially, that framework of sustainable insurance strategy has different components. One of them is introducing a catastrophe model. It also has a caveat which requires 85% coverage. And I will go into more detail within the next slide. So if some of this thing doesn't make sense, don't worry, I'll be covering that. And essentially also includes a safer from wildfires framework. And so since then, we've expanded coverage. So insurance companies are writing and have committed. We have a few that have already committed to writing in higher risk homes that are affected by high fire areas. And we've also have approval of 3 companies. So we've introduced the new climate risk management tool, which really gives them a rate making of what their rates are going to be. And that's the catastrophe model. It does include the reinsurance cost. And also it incentivizes consumers to really take proactive approaches to become wildfire safe. And it also rewards those that are taking the proactive measures in making mitigations. And so you get access to better rates. Let me go to the next slide. In addition to that, we've also continued to modernize the FAIR plan. We went from coverages going from 10,000 per units in HOAs areas and buildings to 20 million per coverages. So that's continuing to be expanded. We've also continued to commit to ensuring in really holding insurers accountable in writing in distressed areas. As I mentioned, the number is 85% of their current market share. So that's what they're going to be committing in order for them to be able to utilize what we call the CAT modeling, catastrophic model, which is what you'll hear. Let me go to the next page. Now, where we currently are. So back in January, the idea of introducing a catastrophe model, and essentially, as I mentioned, that is just a tool. It's a rate-making tool that companies will be able to utilize to essentially identify risks of any peril. So it could be fire, floods, and it's a system that kind of projects where that disaster or where that is going to affect the damages will cover and be able to give you an accurate rate rather than relying on historical data, which was what they have been doing with these past several years, which doesn't tend to be very accurate now, especially with the climate changing. This has actually currently now is fully active. There has been 3 models that have been approved, and those models are the only authorized ones that insurers can utilize. They're going through a process to actually be able to apply for those rates, and they're currently going through those processes. But essentially, those 3 models were vetted through a group of individuals within our department that essentially ensured that they were fair so that insurance companies are not cherry picking with different catastrophe models. So these have been fully vetted. We do have a lot of information about the processing and stuff. If you'd like to know, they're on our webpage. Now, in terms of immediate impact, insurers are using department review wildfire catastrophe models are now mandated to provide and maintain coverages in wildfire-prone areas. As I mentioned, that's part of the caveat for them to be able to even use the catastrophe model. And they do want to use it because they want an accurate rate, right? They want to know what your risk is. They want to be able to charge you according to your risk. And if you're doing proper mitigations for that, then you should be able to get benefits and also reflect into your rates, right? And that's essentially the goal for that, is to really remove those of you that are in the fair plan onto the traditional market. And that's essentially the goal for this. And it's a win-win for all. Now, the next step is we're continuing to roll out and regulate and monitor these different measures that have been put together and continue to ensure protection. So if you are experiencing an issue that you've probably heard that it's not isolated to you, but maybe it's continuing, we always encourage you to report those, because that's the only way we can continue to find out and identify. If you report it, then we know it's a bigger issue if it's several of you, rather if it's one, then it's only an isolated incident, right? So reporting is important.
So what's an example of that?
So let's say you're having, I'm not going to name a company, but let's say insurance company A is, you feel that the rates are extremely high, like, which all of you are, and that's probably a bad example. So let me just switch it up because I might throw you off. let's say, oh, when we had a really good example we've actually had is smoke claims, right? For the victims of fire, they were having issues with getting those processes. So what happened is it was brought up continuously. It was identified as an issue, right? They identified, hey, there's really no policy that restricts or guides what this is. So now there's a task force that's been designed to help guide that and force companies to take those claims and really pay them out. So if there is any issues with particular claims that you've been processing, you know, if it's only you, whatever issue you're having and it's pertaining the insurance industry, report it. If you have a feeling, you know, sometimes you'll have a feeling that, you know, this doesn't seem right. It just doesn't seem fair. I encourage you, submit a claim through our webpage, or if you have general questions, you can call our 1-800 number. Contact information will be on there. You want to make sure that you are bringing those forward, because then Your claim can be assigned to a specialist who can look into the specific dynamics of your policy and ensuring that they're within regulation. And if it's not, then they could take appropriate measures to address that particular issue, and at least gives you a peace of mind, or it addresses if there is an issue. So we can go to the next slide. Now, in terms of, is he going to the next slide?
Welcome to our horrible network here.
So back to while he gets on to the next
In the
stage. we'll
meantime,
talk-
let me ask you a question. Can you explain catastrophic models for everyone?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, a catastrophic model is a tool. It's the best way I can describe it, it's like an app, right? A data sort of central application that essentially takes into account everything. And it's like a GIS, per se. GIS takes into account the mapping of all the cities, right? So the catastrophe model is that it's something similar to that, with the exception that it actually contains data where it takes into account where that has previously been a fire, for say, or an area that's prone to fire. It takes information in terms of identifying any mitigation. So I know a lot of cities are taking appropriate steps, and I know the city of Laguna Beach is actually taking a lot of measures, right, in trying to mitigate fire risks. And so it takes into consideration, even you as a homeowner, what mitigations you're taking. And that's going to be an important component for addressing and really getting a better rates, because it will be reflective on that model. And so they will be able to charge accordingly. So as an insurance company, you're thinking, well, if I can charge according to your risk, essentially that's the important part, is that they are able to charge according to what the risks are. So the higher the risk, the higher the cost, correct? But if you reduce that risk, then the risk is minimized, and therefore the rates should be better. Now, right now, currently, as a homeowner, you have the ability and capability to request a risk score for your current home. So you can call up your company, and if you have any issues, who are you going to call? The California Department of Insurance. Very good. So that's essentially what you'll be able to do. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just continue on to, I'm not sure if they're having tech issues back there. Okay, they are. I see heads nodding. So essentially, there's AB 3074. That is a legislation that was passed back in 2021. And essentially, it says and indicates that there is a zero zone, is what they're referring to. And a zero zone is saying that you cannot have any combustible materials or buildings or anything within 5 feet of the dwelling, so of your home. And it only applies to individuals that are in a high and very high risk areas. And that's in the fire zone, hazard fire maps. So if you're in that area, which I believe Laguna Beach is very much so in that area, you would be required, once that law has been implemented. It currently isn't implemented because it's still going through its development stages of how they're going to implement and how are they going to really penalize, right, for those individuals that are not conforming with the regulation. Local entities, fire departments will be kind of tasked to really push forward that enforcement, is part of what the legislation reads. But essentially, that's going to transpire with that. So we urge you to take proactive measures now in trying to really be proactive before that policy comes into play. Because once it does, then it's going to be a lot more harder. Of course, they're going to give you a time frame. They are going to give you notices, so you'll be noticing in advance. Make sure you do sign up to our consumer alerts just to keep updated with what is coming, and that you're able to do that. So Safer from Wildfires framework essentially gives you certain mitigation efforts, it really sets guidelines of what you can do. Part of it includes, and I have flyers in the back, Building Safer from Wildfires is the flyer, and essentially that gives you an entire listing of what measures you can take. And essentially, this was a framework that was developed and led under the leadership of Commissioner Ricardo Lara, of course, and it was in collaboration with other state entities, including Governor Newsom's Office of Emergency. And so the framework itself, what it does is gives you guidelines in terms of what you're able to do to mitigate your home. So part of it is the roof. It also has the window panes. It has, we can skip over to the Safer from Wildfires. Oh, wait. Let me cover the legislative governor's desk. This is the currently legislation that is at the governor's desk ready to sign, and this essentially is what we currently have. Assembly Bill 888, it's called the California Safe Homes Act. Essentially, it's going to be able to provide you tax-free home hardening grants as you create safer from wildfire communities. And I'll go into depth into those. So sign up to our consumer alerts because we're going to be sending out the process, how to apply, and what you're going to be able to do in order to take advantage of these grants. We also have the Business Insurance Protection Act. Essentially, that is SB 547, and essentially this is to really expand the moratorium that is currently in place for the fire victims. So currently it only applies to homeowners, property homeowners. It does not cover nonprofit organizations or businesses. But with this law now, it's going to cover businesses and nonprofit organizations that are protected with this moratorium. And essentially what the moratorium does is that it prohibits insurers from canceling your insurance for a time frame of 1 year if there's partial damage, and then up to 2 years if there's completely nothing left on your property. So that's a good one. Then we have the California Fire Hardening Commission Act. Essentially, it establishes independent commissions to make recommendations to continue to increase the speed and scale of home and community hardening. And then we have the SB 497, which eliminates the LIST Act. So currently, you're able to get, I believe it's 30% of your contents portion of coverage. But with this policy, it ensures 60% of your contents coverage, and it caps at 350,000 without providing a detailed inventory. If you want to get everything, you have to have a detailed inventory. So we can go to the next slide. The next one is the Insurance Wildfire Safety Act. Essentially, it just enhances insurance discounts by requiring the Department of Insurance to regularly review the Safer from Wildfire regulations. And then we have AB 226, which is the Fair Plan Stability Act. And really, this just provides additional financial stability, and it gives the Fair Plan access to catastrophic bonds and lines of credit. And then we have the Wildfire Public Catastrophic Model Act, and that establishes the nation's first public catastrophic model for wildfires to assist wildfire planning and enhance transparency, of course. Let me go to the next slide. Now, we've already covered this. This is a AB 3074 that I was discussing. So enforcement, as I mentioned, new constructions, they anticipate that those requirements will be going into place now. For existing structures, they anticipate some time next year. And now we can go to the Safer from Wildfires framework that we were discussing, which is on the next slide. And so there's 3 levels of protection. There is the home business, which is you protect yourself. There is the immediate surroundings, and of course, there's the protecting the whole community. So as I was mentioning, for your home, it's the Class A fire rated roof, the 5-foot ember resistance zone, which is what the previous policy that we were discussing, it's what it's referring to. No combustible items 6 inches at the bottom of the exterior walls, ember and fire resistant vents, upgraded windows, and enclosed aves. So we also have protecting your immediate surroundings. How do you do that? It's clearing vegetation, debris, decks, right? Removing combustible sheds and really creating a defensible space, trimming and removing any debris that can easily catch on fire or become flammable. Now, the way you protect your whole community, that is a measure and does take initiative by a community member to work in collaboration with various departments. It is part of fire, and there's city entities that you can also, like Public Works, Office Emergency. I believe it's part of the offices that you tend to work with. Essentially, what you do in this area is you get not only yourself protected in the mitigations of creating your home a safer zone and doing mitigations in your own home, but now you're gathering your neighbors to do the same. And so you can do a minimum of 8 homes, and it's a maximum of 2,500 homes that can be included in one designated area. So you do go through a certification process, and you do get certified, and you use that certification to provide to your insurance provider to acknowledge that you are a fire-wise community. And I believe currently right now, those under the FAIR plan, if you do have that designation, you are that's being recognized, and they have to give you a better rate because of it. So ensuring that you're working not only with your fire departments, I believe they also do free assessments that you can take advantage of, but also working with your FireWise representative. And they have contacts and have great working relationships with the liaison for your community. But essentially, the FireWise Council contact, they're the ones that kind of help you, guide you also with the planning, along with, you have a team full in a sense that will guide you through the process. And at the same time, they are able to obtain and look for grants so that everything doesn't come out of pocket. So now you're working with your whole, with your community, with your neighbors, to really create a safer community for you and yourself. And essentially the goal is to protect you and your home and your financial assets. We can go to the next slide. Now, I'm gonna let you watch a video. This is in Paradise. I don't know if you remember the fires that took place back in 2018. It was like one of the most devastated. It was the largest prior to the ones in LA. And so this is the Rebuild Paradise Foundation. They had worked together to establish and rebuild Paradise. So they've took the Safer from Wildfires framework and applied and implemented. So this is the work they've done to create new and safer communities. They have been going through the certification. They've got gravel. They had a whole program established to help their communities all rebuild. And so this is just a video of just kind of synopsis of what they did and the work that they did working together to really work their efforts in providing a safer community. So the commissioner was out there really just kind of being their support and guidance. And then, of course, they continued. And so it's possible when you guys come together to really create your communities to be safer, but it does take proactive approaches. It does take working together and really using the reliable resources that you have here within the city. They're ready. I know they're ready to really help and assist. We can go to the next page. So that's just an example of how the framework really does work, how communities can work together. And of course, Paradise has now been insurable since then. And this is our consumer alerts now. This is what I was, if you scan this QR code, you can sign up to receive the latest, once those legislative policies that are going to go into effect, and when they go into effect, the grants, when they become available, you will be the first to know through our consumer alerts. So be sure to sign up. And I am ready for questions. I thank you for your time. Contact, it will be on the next page.
I think we have a remote mic out there. And if Chris Kaseup, our inspector, can help out, he'll bring the microphone to you. So if you have a question, yeah, just raise your hand and we'll get to you.
I was wondering if you could give us a little more of guidance on the fencing issue. What kind of fencing, including the question about privacy? Um, w- What's accepted, what's not, but also, can you give us the insight about if people are looking also for privacy?
Thank you. So with regards to fencing, when it comes to zone zero, that is the first 5 feet from the structure working your way out, correct? So when the zone zero comes into effect, what it requires is non-combustible fencing. So what does that mean? No vinyl, no wood, more like metal or anything that is readily non-combustible. Some materials that have been treated or manufactured that are fire-resistant materials that are used for fencing, and that's what that is. As far as privacy, I really can't speak a lot to that, depending, what you utilize for creating that privacy curtain, if you will. But we definitely recommend non-combustible because when you're looking at a structure's vulnerability within that first 5 feet, it's very important because you have the radiant heat and then you may have direct embers that are being cast from that item that may be on fire onto the structure itself. So we recommend, the zone zero will require non-combustible material all the way around. Wood is definitely not it's definitely a combustible material, so that would be eliminated from that, those type of materials. There are a lot of materials on State Fire Marshal's website as well. They're called listed materials because they've gone through laboratory testing. And we have a sheet up there in the table behind you guys that you can review. And there's also a QR code you can download and look at all those products that State Fire Marshal actually does, has approved for materials to be used. That's very helpful in that area. So if you're going to replace those, I'd like to direct you towards that list as well.
Hi, I've got a question. Great presentation, so very good job. I think it makes sense to help people understand what the actual dollars and cents will be. For instance, I'm pretty aware of what happened in Pacific Palisades. My insurance has gone up fivefold, 500%. Neighbors' insurance has gone up tenfold, 1,000%. And that's with the current reference to the idea of there's an insurance crisis. Basically, insurance companies pulling out of the state and using their leverage to get prices up. Now, people in safe zones are not going to experience 5 to 10-fold increases, but when you're deemed not exactly safe, it could be 5 to 10. One of the things that's really important, so that's dollars and cents. Another practical thing for individuals with insurance is to review their insurance policy, and hopefully you'd be able to provide guidance on this. So when you look at your insurance policy, oftentimes, I think for the last few years, insurers have been told that they have to give you an estimate of the replacement cost value of your house. A lot of companies use Verisk's model, and they come up with a replacement cost value using that. That's usually from your agent, who's basically just a salesman. One of the key things is to try to do everything as a homeowner to make sure that your replacement cost value is almost as high as your policy limit. Because what you'll find when a fire comes through and burns down your house is that the insurance company will be very happy to give you your replacement cost value, but then you'll have to go into some interesting conversations about getting what your policy limit is extended coverage, code upgrades, plants and shrubberies. So one of the things is, I think the people here don't like the fact that Zone Zero is basically going to make their places look like a trailer park, but that's pretty much happening across LA right now. But it would really be helpful for the people here to know something about the costs. The CAT models, when you're in a high fire risk zone, will not lower rates. The CAT risk models, as you know, Mercury came through with the 6.9% rate increase, but you can get to 6.9% by insuring 99% of the houses with an increase of 6% and 1% with a 100% increase. So 6.9 is obviously just Mercury trying to get under the bar of Prop 103. So again, I think it would be helpful for the folks here and broadly in Laguna Beach to learn something about, one, what's coming their way in terms of rates based upon the neighborhood they live in, and then what they can do. But risk modeling isn't the magic thing. And it's not even clear that the insurance companies will give you any discount for hardening, because so far the amount that people can save by hardening their houses is like $100. And that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing. Now, there were several things he mentioned that it's all very true and correct in terms of ensuring that you understand your value, understanding what you're covered for, the difference between the value of the home and the replacement costs. As I mentioned before, any questions about what you're really covered for, please submit that through our office. You can file a complaint, is what we call it, or a request for assistance, really is what it is. And you will assign a specialist who can actually go through and look at what those endorsements, what the exclusions are, and give you a better understanding. Because I do understand not everybody can sit there and read all those pages or understand all those little exclusions. So understand that you do have a resource with us to look at that. In terms of rates, because it's something that's being ruled out, what it is, we don't like to set really what that minimum or of cost it will be, just because it will all depend on what your coverages are. It's going to vary. And so I don't want to set an expectation and then it's going to set on over. So it is going to be different depending, it's a case by case in terms of that. Mitigation is important. And now what was the other question? It was,
Well,
I think that answered it, right?
If I can just finish this, the experience
So the
amongst,
question,
okay,
what was the question? Did I answer the questions?
you didn't answer mine. No.
So what, okay, did I leave one out? What was the question I left out?
Well, I believe it's disingenuous to say that people should file a complaint or inform the DOI. If you follow the Eaton Fire Survivor Network headed up by Joy Chen in Altadena, it's replete with people saying that they've contacted the DOI. And especially in the case of smoke claims, apparently what the DOI is telling people that, well, you know, maybe you should go to mediation because the DOI doesn't have an answer. Because based upon Garabedian, you know that there's this idea that's being challenged that smoke damage is not physical damage and insurance only covers physical damage. That would be something worth telling people here about. Contacting someone at the DOI is fine, but it's important to, one, make sure that your replacement cost value is up at your policy limit.
So I don't want to forget. So just to respond that question, yes, it is. It's not. It's imperative you contact DOI, Department of Insurance, and the reason is because, as you mentioned. Now, just to recap on the role of the Department of Insurance, the role of the Department of Insurance is to enforce regulation. It does not have the power to create new legislation, right? But it is working on measures in which it can mitigate, right? So smoke claims. Well, of course, the department can address it now because there isn't a regulation that actually enforces that or a guideline for that sake. So it does give us the opportunity to work with the proper entities to create something that will help protect you.
Okay.
Say, I'm one of the 465 families that lost everything they owned in the fires in 1993, October 27th. I had really good insurance through Farmers. They paid my living expenses for almost 3 years, but it still took 3 years to rebuild my house. I lived there for a while, sold it, and I ended up buying a house down the hill. And so now I'm on Bluebird and I back into the River Canyon. I researched it before I bought my house. The Bluebird River is considered to be a blue line river on the USGS. So United States Geological Survey considers it a year-round river, even though because of the drought, most of the time it's just a nasty trickle. This time of year, it's still green, but in about another month or two, it'll be really brown. And the thing is I can't, I mean, I cut all my shrubbery back. I cut everything back, but I can't really cross over into the river canyon. I've gone to the fire department a couple times now begging them, please let us have goats. I mean, I'll pet them, I'll feed them, I'll give them water. Yeah, just tell me what we need to do, but we're desperate to get something that's gonna take out all that shrubbery. I mean, it's a fire danger. I could do things all day long and every single day. It's not to mitigate the danger that's just over the fence from where I live.
Get this question.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. And you are correct. The Blue Line Stream, there's a lot of laws that protect that. The Blue Line Stream could be Fish and Wildlife, it could be USGS, or even Coastal Commission. We don't know until we look at the area. But it is very protected, and we do have to abide by those standards as well. There are a lot of environmental constraints that when it comes to fuel reduction, that we have to abide by. Our city is unique. As you know, we try to preserve our serenity and provide the safety at the same time. So we do have to abide by those environmental constraints. But Bluebird is one area that we have a couple of different ways that we reduce fuel out there. We have go grazing in certain areas, and certain areas we'll be doing handwork out there. It all depends where your home is at. I would love to get your property address a little bit later after this meeting so we can look closer at your area in particular. So, but with Blue Line Stream, we do have certain limitations, and we have to abide by those. A lot of times we have to apply our treatment protocol as well when it comes to habitat area. So beyond those, the entire city is working to expand certain areas as well. So we've invested a lot, but I would love to get your address and look at the area, see if there's additional measures that we can take to reduce some of that vulnerability there. But yeah, definitely we are limited to a certain extent.
All the neighbors are close, and so we would possibly go to fire inspector. But anyway, it's privately owned, and I'm supposed to be permission from the property owner to go on and start cutting it back. I was going to go send a letter, and I can tell you, the user's property owners send a letter saying, to give the fire department permission to send boats in and get everything done.
Right, when we do our fuel reduction out there, and if it's a sensitive land, or even if it's not, when we do have to go on private property or individually owned parcels, we do send out encroachment permit or encroachment application or authorization from the property owner, and we do obtain those. And we do obtain them before we actually get on and do those fuel reductions. If necessary, we do get those authorizations from property owners. That's correct.
Just a real quick point of clarification, because I think this comes up a lot. As Robert said, there's two ways we do fuel modification. One, goats, two, hand crews. The goats, it's about 280 acres, I think. That's historic. That's locked in. Coastal Commission says done. So you can't expand into other parts of the city with goats. They don't like goats from an environmental perspective. So as much as we'd like to expand the goat program because it's super cheap compared to the hand crews, we can't. So what we've been doing is we now have, I think, 200 acres that we've gotten the Coastal Commission to approve issuing permits on that we can do the hand crews at a much higher level of cost. And I think we've got 2 more that we're in process. So, you know, that's just so people understand the framework. We as the city can't just say, oh, we're going to go over here today because we'd love to reduce fuel modification or fuel risk over here. It's a very time-consuming, expensive process, but we are continuing to push and expand where we can. I think we need to do more, and I think the council also believes we need to do more. We just have it's just a tough process.
Okay. I'm concerned about fire mitigation zone 19. I'm concerned about fire mitigation zone 19. What's the status? That's the Diamond Canyon area.
Sure. Thank you for that question. Field modification zone 19 and 16, we are still in a permitting process. I do want to share that it's an arduous process that we have to go through with various governmental entities. In other words, Coastal Commission, Fish and Wildlife, and any other organizations that are out there. But 19, excuse me, we did submit our application to the Coastal Commission for the project, and they came back with some additional comments, and we are addressing those comments because when we go through it, I don't want to get too deep into the technical side of things, but the permitting process takes quite a bit. Sometimes it takes a year, 2 years, even upwards of 3 years. Unfortunately, that's beyond our control. By the time we do all the notifications, environmental studies, a lot of that stuff that we have to do in order to complete an application and submit to the Coastal Commission, we're talking quite a bit. So we've done all those environmental studies, we submitted our application, we got comment back, and the comment back is, because we are negatively impacting the environment by reducing the fuel out there, we have to come up with a restoration project elsewhere. So we try and secure a restoration site right now, so that way we can resubmit our application back to Coastal Commission. They can review it again. If any additional comments, then if not, then they'll go through their normal process of posting that project and making it available for public comments or any other appeals that they require, that their act requires. But we're in that stage right now. We're trying to identify and secure a restoration site so we can resubmit back to Coastal Commission. And in order to secure a restoration site, we have to get permission, and we have to get an agreement from the property owners to allow us to restore the site and maintain it for 5 years. That's required under Coastal Commission requirements. So it's quite a bit that we're still trying to work out in order to get that permit resubmitted.
Thank you for your presentation. I was encouraged with the adoption of the CAT maps because my understanding is one of the reasons most of the major insurance companies that have fled the state did it in part because they weren't allowed to use those to underwrite their forward-looking risk. Be that as it may, and you said that the models have been reviewed, but it's really the assumptions that go into the models. And one of the key assumptions is the fire map. And I just had my policy renewed. I'm an outlier because I'm in Corona Del Mar, but I'm in a moderate risk area. I was, and I continue to be. And my insurance went up only 107%. After adopting all the recommendations and requirements that were imposed on us by the insurance company with a site inspection. I talked to my broker and he said, look, the insurance companies have their own maps. They don't care about the California map that was just updated in May. It doesn't matter. And he said, basically the whole state and this was only one insurance company, but the rest of them have fled. They view the whole state as high fire risk because they look at, for instance, the Palisades fires and they saw properties burn on the beach in Malibu. And so any area is a high risk area, or very high risk area. My question is this, with that as a backdrop, what's the CDI's outlook here? Because it seems like there's a big catch up here, not only in terms of the companies that are still writing policies in the state to price the risk appropriately. And I'm assuming that's, what was impacted to us. I also have sprinklers in my house, by the way. And I have, so all this stuff about mitigants and things that can, kind of manage the premium risk, they just ignore it. They don't care. And that's what our broker basically told us right now. They're hopeful that that'll mitigate. So my question is, does the CDI have a view or an outlook if all this stuff kind of comes to play, and as to when things will start to normalize in terms of premium increases, assuming the best, fire prevention, repricing of the risk and all that? Because for right now, we can, I mean, no offense, but the reality is that these insurance companies have leverage, because if they can't get and I said, has my premium been reviewed? And they say, oh yeah, of course, all the CDI approved the premiums. But the approach is that either the premiums are approved or they bail. And because there's relatively almost no competition in the state anymore for homeowners, they have the leverage here. So I know that it's provocative, I'm sorry, but can you just give us an outlook on, if you can, on how this is going to normalize at some point? Because it affects not just my area, not just here, the higher risk areas, but the whole state. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. And it's important to us. I'm glad you asked it. So I think the most important thing to keep in mind is the catastrophe model and everything is the rates for those are just being looked at now. I highly encourage you to submit what you have. If you feel like there is a component of your mitigation that's being ignored and it's not being acknowledged, I encourage you to submit a request for assistance so that we can look. Now, the main role of the Department of Insurance is to ensure that the rates are not excessive, right? That's the role. And so when we look at what the risk is, they have, and these are the actuaries. I am by no means an actuary, so I don't know the specifics, but I can tell you this much. They look at data that they're submitting. They have to justify. And so if you feel, which it sounds like you do, I encourage you to please submit a request for assistance.
Can we get the microphone so people that are online can hear your question?
Okay. We have a lot of people that want to ask questions
Yeah.
here, so.
I thought about that, and the bottom line is I'm concerned that if I do that, I could be canceled, because my insurer, who's not insuring any new people, I've been a client for a long time, they do have a cancellation list, according to my broker, that they kind of go down the line. So I know this isn't whistleblower, but are there any whistleblower type protections for people that file complaints or inquiries based on their individual circumstances?
Okay, so I can tell you my experience. I go out and my main role is outreach, presentations. Now I'll tell you this much. I've been out in the community and there have been members who mentioned that they received a cancellation notice. And she said, I am so grateful for your department. I called your office, and within a few weeks, I got a call from the insurance company reinstating me. So understand we have no power to force them to insure you, but it doesn't hurt to call. And fear of cancellation shouldn't be the reason why you don't protect your assets or ensure that you're getting a fair coverage.
Okay.
Hi, two simple questions. One, in my neighborhood, we have paper streets owned by the city. Nothing's being done to clear that or to do anything about that, so I would like something done. And two, my insurance company is offering for free I have to agree to it, that they'll come at a risk time and spray my house with something. And I don't know what it is, and I don't know how you get it off afterwards. Can you explain a little bit about what that product is?
I'll try to answer the first question, and that is towards the paper streets. And if I don't know your address, but I'll let you know that we are in contract right now with an agency that's going to come and do some fire risk modeling. And so they use artificial intelligence, they use the weather, the slope, weather conditions, past historic fires, and they're going to look at if a fire started in one area with predominant wind, how that fire is going to perform, and what areas of our community are most at risk. We're doing this twofold to first identify areas that we're not currently engaging in mitigation, where we don't have existing zones. And then secondly, we're going to try to find out the performance of the zones that we do have in place, the 22 zones that are protecting the community. So if you're talking about a area of town, we're going to be evaluating, prioritizing, and we anticipate that we are going to create some more zones so we could do some of the fuel removal. The second question, I don't know that I could address the performance of a private industrial product that's out there. There's definitely some businesses that are starting up that I know are external sprinkler systems that can activate. I know that they're quite pricey, but I would have to just recommend that you do your best homework on how that's going to perform. So I can't endorse any private industry.
And if you can actually send me the letter, if you can send that to me so I can take a look at it. Yeah, just so I can take a look at what it is, if it's a bigger thing or what.
I've been told not to sign up for it. They do it very quickly, and then getting it off the house is another, it's like a phone or something.
Yeah, it's the first time I hear of such a thing.
And I guess I'll speak to that a little bit. There's definitely startups that are occurring. I would caution you because what we're seeing is more and more people trying to get into disaster zones, especially when the emergency responders that are supposed to be there are responding. There are more stops in place to make sure that the homeowners and the residents that are at risk get out, and that people that don't belong there that aren't emergency responders aren't allowed to get in. So, yep.
I have a couple pieces of information from the front lines. I'm a Palisades fire survivor whose house made it in a neighborhood where 1,000 houses around me burned down. And it did make it due to exterior fire sprinklers that we put in purposely when we built it in 2012. I will say there's another section of Pacific Palisades called the Huntington, where people went out during the fire and spent $25,000 to get this foam fire retardant that you're talking about sprayed on their houses, and half of that neighborhood is still standing. So that may be worth it, looking into whatever fire retardant that was. There's an entire half a neighborhood still standing. Third point, I have an excellent insurer, USAA, and I said to them, hey, my house made it. Doesn't that mean something for my rates? And they said, no. We evaluate your entire area for its likelihood to burn down. And just because your house made it due to the things that you did, sorry. You know, like the rest of the loss is so large that it kind of doesn't matter. There's some thoughts for you. Oh, last thing, you guys are super lucky to be living here because the city of LA is an S show, and Orange County is handling things like 1,000% better.
I think I understand in zone 0 that vegetation is allowed, but dead leaves, dead sort of stuff needs to be cleared away. Is that true, or is it more
Thank you
strict
for
than
that question. You are partially correct. So under the current defensible space standards, when it comes to vegetation within so many feet around the parameters of a home, there are some vegetation allowed currently under our current standards, but once the new Zone 0 standard goes into effect, then no, from 0 to 5 feet, hardscape only, and and no wood chips or anything like that would be permitted under the Zone 0 standards. But currently, yes, but once the state passes this legislation, then no, it wouldn't be permitted. And today, from what I've heard in our meeting from the Cal Chiefs Fire Marshals Association, I was attending a meeting this morning. They're still talking about the Zone 0 allowing up to 3 years for currently built homes to catch up with that. And then new construction have to be enforced immediately upon construction, but they're still going through trying to fine tune some of those things in anticipation of this thing passing in 2026.
This seems like this would have an enormous impact on a. This seems like this would have an enormous impact on a whole lot of people very quickly. That individual homeowners really can't handle if they happen to have just a bunch of old mature trees right up against their home.
Yeah, the challenge is going to be there because in our community is very unique. Our lots are much smaller. Our setbacks are less than the standard setbacks in most places in California. You're correct. But your city, we will be working through all those challenges when this is implemented and move the best way forward to what makes sense for us, for our community as well. And we still want to comply with the law and the standards, of course.
One sort of follow on, the other thing that's probably common as could be are thank you, our wood fences everywhere, right? And so sort of related, but not exactly to the idea of foam, but there are some treatments that can make wood more fire resistant. Is that going to be an option in this new paradigm, or not
Well,
even?
Thank you. That's a great question. So there are treatments for the wood, but if we look at what the law states, the material per se, doesn't reflect the treatment of an existing wood or anything like that. But those are some of the things we're going to be looking at. And as far as any kind of system for your home, there are a lot of companies that are coming up. There are a lot of pre-engineered system per se. I see those on the internet. I get contacted by various companies throughout the week. There are some neat systems that are coming up. Some systems that really make sense, that they're pretty proof, but you just have to do your research, especially on pre-engineered system to protect your home. They're not cheap, but they provide you the next level of protection. I can't recommend one over the other, but as they come up, as they go through, and these products or these programs, or rather products, are proven themselves, I'm sure the state fire marshal will be looking at those, working with individual or laboratories to test those products or their systems to have them approved and listed by the state fire marshal. Eventually, they're going to go down that line, I can imagine, but immediately I would do as much research as I can to see, what history they have behind their system and how they have been able to successfully save structures. So homework is your best thing to do right now.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if the city in general or at the state level has given some consideration to responsible planning and building, especially along evacuation routes, because you can have, multiple projects happening at the same time on an important evacuation route. And as we saw in the Rancho fire, it can impede people's ability to exit neighborhoods.
Thank you. It's a great question. With regards to building standards, of course, they work with our community development and building and safety department. And when it comes to them obstructing a roadway, egress, or anything like that, they do have to notify the city, and the city notifies our dispatch system, and therefore the police department, fire department is aware of that. And they have a very limited time and area where they can actually obstruct. There are a lot of standards for applying for those encroachment permits through the city. So We are keen on those, and our departments, city and police and fire are notified all the time by building and safety when they apply for those encroachment permits. But yes, we're aware of those, and we try to make the department, before they issue those permits, try to make any accommodations that they can for alternate route of egress and all that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. We bought a property here and we are in the process of getting our building permits for a brand new structure. I'm having a nightmare getting insurance. There was a slide that went very quickly. You mentioned something, I think, about insurance companies are coming back into the market. But the only quote I've gotten so far is deeming our property a commercial property. And then the FAIR plan doesn't really cover builder's risk. So looking for any advice.
Certainly. Congratulations for your expansion. So in terms of finding insurance, we have under our consumer tab on our webpage, you can actually search through lines of insurance. So if your property is deemed commercial, you would look under commercial policies. It wouldn't be homeowners. Oh, it's not. I am so glad you mentioned that. That takes me to the other note. I cannot emphasize enough to do your due diligence. I love agents, but agents are limited at times to who they do business with. And sometimes, not saying all, but sometimes they will do things to try to keep your business. And so you want to make sure that your diligence to identify if there is insurance companies or you're checking with other agents. I'm going to leave you with that. Chief. So if you go, I encourage you to go onto our webpage. There is a listing of maybe a little over 115 companies.
Can I also mention something that
Yes.
we learned recently? There's an insurance business for home safety. It's an organization that works with some insurance companies, IBHS. You may want to look at that. So if you are building your home, you're building it according to the Defensible Space Standards, especially Zone 0, you may be able to obtain a certificate from them and they've signed on with a couple of insurance companies. You may want to see if you can get that certificate from them and sign up with those insurance companies to get a decent rate as well.
I got a question. CAL FIRE sets the zones right here. Is that right? So if you brought CAL FIRE in and asked them, look, we're at the highest level. How do we come down one level? If every single home, I'm not saying this is possible at all. If every single home had that 0 zone and every tree was gone, does that bring us down to the next level, or is this an impossibility? Having that understanding then helps us fight with the insurance carriers and helps you, I would imagine, as well, because it sets some kind of a baseline. How do we get down a notch?
So I want to make sure that we understand the CAL FIRE maps. The CAL FIRE maps only reflect the areas in which there has been a fire. You cannot remove, per se, any mitigation. You can't remove, if the area has been zoned safe or mitigated, there's no way to alter that. The maps, you can only add to it, you can't remove from it.
If I can make
Yes.
additional comments on that. So you are correct that Department of Forestry, in conjunction with state fire marshals, are tasked with developing those fire hazard severity zone maps. And what the maps reflect, those zones reflect, are hazard, not risk. They're two different things. We're looking at apples and oranges. So hazard that the maps do identify are based on topography, vegetation, greater vegetation, instead of at home level. Okay, we're looking at zones, areas, cities, counties, and communities. So we're looking at weather, previous fires, fire history, topography, and the vegetation that's prominent in those communities. So there is no basically almost no way to change those zones. However, the insurance companies do reference those maps. However, they evaluate risk. Now, risk is something that takes those hazards into consideration, but they also look at any mitigation measures that individual homeowners or a community does to assign a risk level to that. So they're two different things. Hazards are natural, and most of the times it cannot be changed. So I hope that answers your question better.
And I'll add, I'll try to turn the answer into a positive. By the way, you asked the question. If you had a section of town, several blocks, and it's been mentioned in the slide, I think the best step would be to be creating a Firewise community. You can take greater than 8 houses, less than 2,500, choose the neighborhood a couple of blocks, and it's a grassroots effort, but you can take those steps to become a Firewise community, which means that you're removing the vegetation, you're following all the steps and the guidelines, and then you can be designated by the state and certified, and that will increase your chances of maintaining your insurance. We've been talking about that for about a year now. We have one community that just crossed the finish line. We have 2 that are still working through the process, but we'll continue to promote that. So you can take some steps individually as a community and increase your ability to maintain insurance or even lessen rates.
So Chief, maybe we could, maybe not here, but maybe at some point we could highlight those, maybe at a council meeting or something, those communities that one, I think, are you talking about Arch Beach Heights or?
Arch Beach Heights is really close, but we just had one up in the canyon that crossed the finish line pretty quickly.
So we want to get some models so that residents could look at what what that looks like and what they have to do. So, okay,
Yeah,
who's the
we'll
next
definitely
person?
highlight them.
Well, I'm going to try to get some first, anybody? Okay.
Just to follow up on that, we have a community of about 20 houses, and we brought this up at a homeowner meeting recently, and some of the neighbors were interested and some were not. Do you have to have all contiguous, like if we've got some homeowners in our community that don't want to do it, but we can still get 8 or more, can we process a Firewise community?
Yes, you can. You can still submit to Firewise. It doesn't have to have all 20, let's say. Minimum requirement is 8. And frankly, you don't want to go above 20 for a Firewise to form one, because it requires so many hours per home to be invested in a Firewise program. And once you hit above 20, it gets a little too cumbersome and too much for one small community to maintain that status. So 20 is the max State Fire Marshal recommends and we recommend, but minimum is the 8, and they don't have to be contiguous.
And then just to add, I would be more than happy to come out and bring a presentation over to kind of help with that. If we have a minimum of 25 folks that attend, just to kind of bring over, and we can also bring other entities that can help explain on the process.
I'm also with the California Department of Insurance, and I just wanted to reiterate along with that is that when you do become a Firewise community, you can actually get grants, apply for grants for mitigation in your local area. So we encourage all of you to look at your local communities and try to find ways that you can do that. Many people, what they have done is they put together chipper programs with the grants that they get. So once a month, they bring someone over and everybody brings out all of their excess fuel and they clean that up. Other communities have used that money to get vents for everybody, so that everybody gets new vents and gets that taken care of. Another thing that maybe as a community, besides, I heard about goats, and one of the big things, with goats, they have been able to get some of those there. And the wonderful thing about goats is that they not only get rid of the vegetation, and then also their waste is also a deterrent for fuel when that, whenever that happens. So those are some of the things that people have used to raise money to be able to help their community get get a little bit more mitigation. And ultimately, when we're saying that, we're looking at the sustainable insurance strategy with the catastrophe models, it is very much so, so that we can look at very particular communities. When insurance companies in the past, what they would say is this entire zip code is just not feasible for us to do business there. Excuse me. Now with a sustainable insurance strategy, now that we're looking at the catastrophe models, we'll be able to actually look at particular areas. And if you're a fire-wise community, you're going to be able to actually show that is that we are doing everything that, everything that we can to actually bring down that risk. And so then when they are looking for homes to get out of the FAIR plan, those are the homes that they're going to be looking at. So if you are in the FAIR plan now, the more you do to mitigate your home, the more you're going to be attractive to those companies to be able to sell insurance to you. No, the prices are not going down immediately, but the idea is very much so to get more insurance companies to do more business in the state, so that then they can, as they're making that happen, and they're looking for people to get out of the FAIR plan, that will then eventually then start bringing the rates down.
So what is the mechanism to get these grants?
So these grants are through Cal OES and Cal Fire. So you can actually look at just the California grants portal. There's a portal there, and you can just put in there mitigation, and then you can see all of the different grants that are there. So, but you can't, as an individual, you really can't apply for these yourself, right? So then this is why we encourage you create a wild. One of these communities, so that you're safer from wildfires altogether.
Chief, do you want to talk about how we go about getting grants? Because we get grants for field mod and other things.
Yeah, we're always monitoring what grants are available. So they're usually announced. We'll get email notifications, and we've been fairly successful at achieving grants for the two zones that were mentioned earlier this evening, 16 and 19. We have about $500,000 in grant funds that have already been awarded that we could use towards the initial passes and getting those studies done, which we used, and then the initial passes, which is the costliest of removing the bulk of the fuel. So we've used them for, I believe, Park Avenue and then zones 17 and 18, which have already been implemented. So we'll continue to monitor those grants. And then, yeah, specifically to the Firewise, once you achieve a Firewise community, if that's the path that you went down, there's a website where you can search for grants that are available within your Firewise community to do those continued modifications, getting the screens, the chipper program that was mentioned. So that would take some of the initiative on your own once you become a Firewise community.
Okay, anybody else has it? Okay.
Thank you. So along those lines, just theoretically, if all of Portofino, all of Arch Beach Heights, all of Top of the World, all of Temple Hills, and all of Mystic Hills band together over time and created contiguous Firewise communities over time, also could submit for grants. So it'd be a combination of property owners and grants, the city and grants on the property outside of those. How would that impact our way in which Laguna Beach residents can get insurance in the future?
Remember, as we were mentioning, and I know as our deputy commissioner was mentioning as well, insurance companies are coming back. And so the first individuals that they're looking at is those that have mitigation. So that's how you're going to benefit. It's being insurable and be able to protect your asset. That answer.
Just zooming out a little bit, I guess the historical rates were not reflective of the risk. There's been an overreaction. Things might come down, but the new normal is like they've got to price the risk unless California is going to subsidize things. If it's actually going to be commercially viable, sustainable, very high rates are the new normal. Is that fair to say?
And I think that the way our overall outlook, right, and its efforts is, as we understand economy, it's availability, right? Supply and demand. And as we anticipate the market stabilizing as we are, right? We already have insurers coming back. Is first we're tackling availability before we can even tackle affordability. So that's kind of the way it's heading, and we anticipate for a positive outcome within the next coming years.
Anybody else? Okay. I'm trying to hit the homeowners here, make sure everybody gets there.
So we understand that the zero zone is going to start rolling out for new construction with first.
When it gets implemented, yes.
And it's implemented.
Yes.
And it sounds like that would then necessarily mean that design review, when it reviews landscape plans, would start taking that into consideration.
Right. We have to look at all of our standards, construction standards, to see how we're going to fit that in. That's correct.
Right. And then it should also, I imagine, potentially require code changes for view restoration, hedge height claims, all these sort of things where maybe currently fire risk is not part of the equation, but it would need to be. And I don't know that there's accommodation within the code today that allows a view restoration committee, for instance, to include fire risk as part of their calculus.
With regards to view preservation, I'm not too familiar with those standards. I apologize. That's within community development and building and safety perhaps. But within the fire service, we don't evaluate view preservation when it comes to fire safety. Those are two different standards.
It's not part of our ordinance. It's not part of the process. I'm not saying it shouldn't be, but it's the way, it's kind of the way it is now. Okay, anybody else? Questions? Okay. Do you have a question?
So thank you for the informative presentation. I know that there's a lot of residents that are concerned about retaining their historical charm. So when AB 3074 becomes applicable to this community, are there pre-treated materials that homeowners would be able to utilize aside from metal fencing or examples that have been given that homeowners will have access to retain, the way their home is, their current curb appeal or whatever it may be? Thank you.
Sure, great question. As I mentioned earlier, the state fire marshal has a comprehensive list of listed materials. And again, these are materials that have been tested through individual laboratories and for their fire resistive abilities. So I would go through that comprehensive list because the state of California has the highest standard with regards to listed products. There are a lot of products in there. We have the QR code that's back there. You can download and look at that list. There's also a link to it from our website on lagunabeach.net/fire prevention. You can look at that listed products as well. But yes, there are a lot of things out there, and those are some of the nuances we have to go through when that is implemented, and work with our building and safety department to see what materials we're going to allow and disallow essentially within Zone 0. But for most part, there's Chapter 7 within the fire code as well that sets the standards for construction within a high fire severity zone that we've already implemented in our city for the last several years. So with regards to construction standard, we've already implemented a lot of those things. Zone 0 is more defensible space for vegetation placement than anything else for most part. But construction standards, Chapter 7A, has already been incorporated in most of the city already. I hope that helps.
Kind of a broad question. So Bob and I have been working on this fire mitigation, fire safety plan, in town since 2019. And we spent about 25, probably it'll be about $30 million really by the end of this year, I think, or something like that. But so I know we're talking about hazards and mitigation, but will the insurance companies look at what we've done as a whole? And I understand the CAL FIRE maps, but when we've had other cities ask for our plans, a lot of cities don't have these comprehensive plans like we do. Is it impactful at all? from an insurance point of view from the commissioner's office?
Yes, my understanding is that they would be taking into consideration the mitigation being done. And I can get
And I'll add, Sue, just under council's direction, we've been, as a fire department, paying attention to what we need to accomplish that is going to be most impactful. And there's really 3 areas of focus to become a fire risk reduction community, which was presented in one of the slides. We're currently working on a community wildfire protection plan that has to be updated. That's the biggest part of us accomplishing the certification of become a fire risk reduction community. Through the state, we know that that's recognized and it'll have an impact on helping homeowners maintain their insurance. The other piece is our ISO rating as a fire department. Some insurance agencies still look at that and they modify their price. By your ISO rating, we're a 3 right now. I'm optimistic, and we're going to be evaluated. The first meeting is next week, actually. So that's coming up, where they're going to look at our water supply systems. They've been greatly improved within the last decade. So we're going to score better there. But they also look at our staffing levels, which have been improved. They look at our response times, our coverage, the type of equipment, and the type of training that we have. So again, I'm optimistic that we could bring that score up. And then the third piece of that is having Firewise communities, which again, we're having some success and some movement in the community. So hopefully with those 3 programs that were recognized a couple years ago as making a difference in the community, that has been our focus. So we're making some good progress by the support, again, of council and the support that they've given us as a fire department.
And then I just want to encourage you, we have informational guides at the back table that talk about the sustainable insurance strategy, the Safer from Wildfires framework as well, so that you can take those home with you.
We also have these handouts. I'm actually going to be walking around some of the neighborhoods and I'm going to be handing these out, but it tells you how to get OC alerts and all the things, the alerting mechanisms that are available, evacuation zones, how to make a go pack. So you should pick up one of these.
Thank you all for
Brenda.
coming out. And thank you, Brenda, for coming out and joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me.